Hello and welcome, everyone. I am Kylie Heap. I'm Executive Director of Support After Abortion. We are just so grateful that you decided to spend some time with us this Wednesday for our webinar on codependency in relationships.
Thank you, Kylie, and welcome everyone. We're so glad you're here today. Today, we'll be talking about codependency in relationships. We'll define codependency and differentiate it from healthy interdependence. We'll identify the common signs and behaviors associated with codependency. We'll examine the root causes and impact of codependency on relationships and our individual well-being. And we'll discuss strategies and resources for setting boundaries and fostering self-care. I just love this image. It's codependency defined in a picture format rather than words. You probably can't tell, but this is one of my absolute favorite topics. So let's start by defining codependency. Codependency is a behavioral pattern where an individual excessively relies on others for emotional fulfillment and approval. Codependency is most often talked about in a marriage or with a partner, but codependency can also exist in any relationship, like between friends, coworkers, siblings, a parent and child, or a grown child with their aging parent. I know because I fell into that trap when I became a caregiver for the purposes of this presentation, we will use the word others. So any relationship or all relationships are included in the codependency discussion. Codependent behaviors have a hidden cost. It's like we disappear. We neglect our own needs. It's like being so busy packing everyone else's suitcase for a trip that you don't realize your own bag is empty and you've missed your flight. We lose our identity when we're codependent. Look at the image here. The person is surrounded by masks. In codependency, you become a chameleon, shifting your personality, your likes, and your opinions to match whoever you're with. After a while, if you ask yourself, who am I when no one is watching, you might not have an answer. And it stalls our personal development. When your energy is 100% focused on others, your own dreams, hobbies, career goals go on the shelf. Eventually, they get pushed so far back, you forget that they were even there. Before we jump into the details, I want to take a moment for some self-reflection. I'm going to share 10 signs that might indicate codependent patterns. As I read each sign, think about yourself or perhaps someone close to you or a client. Feel free to drop your thoughts in the chat. Some of these might surprise you. Maybe you didn't realize they can be linked to codependency. So here we go. You're afraid of upsetting others. You have a hard time thinking about your needs. Your days are full of worrying about others. You obsess about others being pleased with you. You easily lose yourself in others. Drama, needs, and problems. You're more comfortable taking care of others than yourself. You tend to overshare or overgive emotionally, physically, or financially. You struggle setting boundaries or holding people accountable. You suffer from self-doubt. You were raised by someone suffering from an undiagnosed mental illness, a narcissist, or a non-nurturing caregiver. Did anything jump out at you in these signs? To me, it was the word others. It was in so many of the signs. That just highlights how codependence is outward looking, not inward. And we'll talk more about that later. So now we're going to talk about the opposite of codependency, healthy interdependence. If codependency is merging with or disappearing into someone else, interdependence is partnering with them. It's a balanced dynamic where you rely on each other for support, but you don't lose yourself in the process. You are two complete people moving towards shared goals while still maintaining your own unique identity and your own boundaries. You aren't two halves making a whole. You are two wholes walking together. We often wonder why codependency is so hard to spot in our own lives. Often it's because on the surface, it looks like the things we were taught to value most, like care, loyalty, and love. But if we look beneath the waterline, we see a different story. What looks like caring is a dynamic that actually compromises both people. It stops the other person from having to grow or face consequences. It robs you of your own happiness because you are too busy managing others. And ultimately, it kills self-sufficiency. What looks like love on top is actually a cycle of mutual stuckness underneath. Think about a physical injury. If you give someone a crutch to help them heal, that's interdependence. You are supporting them while they get stronger. But if you keep holding them up long after the bone has knit, maybe because you like being needed or you're afraid to see them stumble, the muscles in their leg will eventually atrophy. You aren't caring for them anymore. You are accidentally making it so they can never walk without you again. And you can't go anywhere or do anything for yourself because you have to keep holding them up. That is the bottom of the iceberg. Michelle, over to you.
Thanks, Karen. So let's take a look at codependency and healthy interdependence side by side. We'll consider 4 specific areas: focus, needs, boundaries, and self-worth. These will help us see how codependency and healthy interdependence are very different. We'll start with focus. For a person who's codependent is not themselves, it's someone else. A lot of their energy goes into fixing, pleasing, rescuing, managing, controlling the other person. On the other hand, someone with healthy interdependence is connected to others, but they are centered within themselves. They're aware of what's theirs to carry and what's not. They strive for mutual support in relationships while maintaining their individual identity and autonomy. You might think of it like this: a codependent focus is, I'm okay if you're okay. Whereas an interdependence focus is like, I'm okay and I'm here for you while you're not okay. Another way to think about it is like a shift in gravity. In a codependent dynamic, your gravity is pulled toward the other person and you orbit around them. In a healthy interdependent relationship, you each have your own center of gravity and you choose to orbit together. I'll give you an example. Let's say I was planning to go to the gym, but my partner comes home moody. If I'm codependent, that might make me anxious. I might think, what did I do wrong? What can I do to fix their mood so I feel okay again? I need to stay home to help them. Whereas if I have healthy interdependence and my partner comes home moody, I don't take that on as my problem to fix. Instead, I might think, he seems upset. I'll ask if he wants space or if he wants to come to the gym with me. Maybe I'll suggest a movie or make dinner when I get back. Now let's talk about needs. For this one, we'll look first at healthy interdependence, where needs are openly communicated. You take ownership of your own well-being, and you meet those needs both individually and within the relationship. On the other hand, with someone who has codependency, often they suppress their own needs. They might feel that having or expressing needs is selfish, or that the other person's needs are more important. Their emotional well-being is tied to the other person's state. Have you ever felt like you spent a whole day holding your breath because someone else was in a bad mood? That's what we mean when we say that your well-being is tied to their state, their emotional, physical, or social condition. It's kind of like you're plugged into their emotional outlet. If they have a power surge of anger, you feel fried. If they have a power failure and get depressed, your lights go out too. Whereas in healthy interdependence, you each have your own battery. You can see that their power is out. Maybe you offer them a flashlight, but your lights stay on because your well-being isn't wired into their circuit. Let's look at an example. Let's say you're starving and you want to eat dinner at 6 p.m., but your partner is busy gaming or working. As someone with codependency, you don't say you're hungry. And instead you wait to eat until 8 when they finally get hungry. Maybe you get a headache and act snappy, secretly wishing they just knew that you needed to eat. You've suppressed your physical need for food to avoid interrupting their state. As someone with healthy interdependence, you realize you're hungry and you say, hey, I'm hungry, so I'm going to start dinner. Do you want to join me or would you rather eat later? You take ownership of your hunger, take steps to meet your needs, and you don't make it about them or their fault. In codependency, boundaries are often fluid or non-existent. There's a lot of over-involvement in the other person's problems. You might feel like their crisis is your crisis and you have to jump in to save them from the consequences of their actions. In healthy interdependence, boundaries are clear and respected. You recognize that you're responsible for your own feelings and actions, and they're responsible for theirs. Picture your neighbor's yard and yours. Being codependent is like having no fence between your yards, like the image on the left. Their yard is full of weeds and you feel like you have to pull them. Maybe because you can't tell where your yard ends and theirs begins, or maybe you think they need your help, even if they don't ask. Interdependence is like having a clear fence with a gate, like the image on the right. You're responsible for your own land, your feelings and actions. You can see into their yard and might say, hey, I can see that you're having a rough time with those weeds. And you might choose to offer a tool over the fence, but you aren't doing the work for them. And if your neighbor's weeds creep into your side, you don't tackle their yard, but you can take care of the weeds that get into yours. It's kind of just like in real life. When the other person's weeds, their stress, addiction, bad moods creep into yours, you don't climb the fence into their yard to fix it. You work on maintaining your yard. Let's look at an example. What if, say, your friend or partner's habitually late and it's starting to affect your plans and your activities? The codependent approach, you make excuses for them to others. You stress out and call them 10 times to manage them. You wait for them or you don't go because they're late. You're over-involved in solving their lateness. The interdependent approach, you set a clear boundary. I'm going to head to the movie at 7 o'clock to meet our friends. I've emailed you the ticket. If you are running late, I'll save you a spot and text you the row and seat number. You're taking responsibility for your own evening rather than trying to control theirs or changing your plans because of their lateness. And our last point of difference, where we get our sense of self-worth. For those with codependency, their self-worth comes from sacrificing, helping, or being needed. For those with healthy interdependence, their self-worth is internal, coming from self-respect and personal values, regardless of their relationships. Think of it like the difference between a distorted mirror and the sun. Normally, we see ourselves in a mirror, but with codependency, your reflection, your self-worth, depends on how you are reflected back by the other person. If you're helping or being needed, if they're happy, then you see a good version of yourself in the mirror. But if they're angry, disappointed, or they don't need your help, the mirror goes dark on your image of yourself, and your image of yourself is distorted. In contrast, someone with healthy interdependence has self-worth like the sun. You generate your own light from within, and the sun, it shines regardless of how others see or think about it. People with codependency are often described as fixers. They tend to feel most valuable when their partner or friend is in a mess. They often feel energized when someone's having a crisis because then they can jump in and fix it. But when things are going well and they aren't needed, then they can feel useless or anxious. Some might even pick a fight or point out a problem just to have something to fix to prove their worth again. People who have healthy interdependence are often described as steady. Maybe you feel good about yourself because you hit a personal goal today. Maybe you finished a book or you took a walk. If your partner's doing great, you celebrate with them. If they're doing poorly, you support them, but you don't feel more or less valuable based on how much they rely on you. Your self-worth is a constant, not a variable. Now let's explore some emotional and psychological indicators of codependency. We'll look at 4: difficulty saying no, excessive need for control, difficulty identifying feelings, and anxiety and guilt. Difficulty saying no. Someone with codependency can have an intense need to please others, so they often have a hard time saying no, which can then lead to resentment. For a codependent person, a no can feel risky. Often they aren't saying yes because they want to. They're saying yes because they're worried about what others would think of them if they say no. Here's an example. Say a coworker asks you to take over a project on a Friday afternoon when you're already over capacity. And you think, if I say no, they'll think I'm not a team player, or they'll get mad at me, and I won't be able to relax all weekend knowing that they're upset. So instead you say, sure, no problem, while feeling a pit of resentment in your stomach, and you spend your whole weekend working and feeling angry at the coworker, even though you were the one who agreed to it. Someone with healthy interdependence might think, I want to be helpful, and my coworker's deadline's important, but so are my own projects and my scheduled rest. So instead of saying yes, you say, I hear this project is a priority for you, but I wouldn't have the bandwidth right now. I can help you look at it on Monday, or we can ask our manager if something else on my plate needs to be shifted to make room for this. And as a result, you can go into your weekend feeling light because you were honest and preserved your professional integrity and your peace. Saying no or not now and offering alternatives provides safety rails for you and the relationship. Excessive need for control. People who are codependent often feel anxious or insecure when things are outside their influence, and they use control as a shield against anxiety. If I can manage your choices, your mood, your schedule, then I can predict what's going to happen and I won't be caught off guard by pain. Let's say your child doesn't know what they want to major in and hasn't taken any steps to apply to college. And you think they need to get moving on this or they'll miss the application window, they won't get a good job, their life will be ruined, they can't do it without my help. So you start helping. You research colleges and majors. You tell them what fits best for them. You identify jobs they should aim for. You map out what courses they should take. You talk to the admissions office and start filling out the paperwork for your child. You have taken over and become their manager, orchestrating all the details and choices, all without your child even asking you to do that or being involved. There are at least 3 problems here. First, you're carrying the stress and the actions that belong to the other person, and that can lead to burnout. Second, you're signaling to the other person that they aren't capable of handling their own life. In codependency, our help can often become a hindrance to the other person's growth. And 3, you aren't allowing the other person the opportunity to make choices for themselves, or in this case, the possibility they don't want to go to college, which could lead to them also becoming codependent and just going along to not upset you. Instead of being a manager or a controller, a person with healthy interdependence acts like a consultant. They might think, I'm feeling really anxious about their future, but that's my anxiety to manage. So they might say, noticed application deadlines are coming up. I'm happy to help you brainstorm majors, talk about the colleges you're interested in, or go with you to look at campuses. Let me know if you want that support. And then you go on about your own tasks. If they don't ask for help and they miss a deadline, you can be a soft, empathetic place for them to land, but don't become the engine driving their train. Difficulty identifying feelings. When a person is codependent, they tend to get confused between their own emotions and other people's emotions. Think of the examples we've talked about. After years of managing or people-pleasing mode, you can lose touch with your own internal compass. It's that fusing of emotions, like this image of being a sponge. You struggle to tell if a feeling belongs to you or if you just caught it from someone else. Let's say you're having a great day. You are productive. The sun is out. You feel light and happy. And then your mom calls and she's upset about a family drama. By the time you hang up, your great day is gone. You are now just as upset, angry, or anxious as she is. You haven't just empathized with her. You've absorbed her mood. You've lost the ability to say, Mom is upset, but I'm still okay. A person with healthy interdependence can be deeply compassionate and present for someone else's pain without letting that pain move into their own mind or body. In this example, maybe you listen for 15 minutes, offering empathy, like, that sounds really frustrating, Mom. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. And then after the call, take a deep breath, go for a walk, acknowledge she's in a tough spot, and then intentionally return to your day, keeping your core mood intact. You're able to say, Mom's upset, but I'm okay. And anxiety and guilt. Feeling responsible for other people's emotions, choices, or well-being is common for those who have codependency. And the weight of this can lead to anxiety and guilt. You can feel that if the other person is failing, somehow that reflects your failure to save them. Imagine your sibling gets a speeding ticket that they can't afford and they ask you to pay it for them. Even though you weren't in the car, you feel a crushing sense of guilt. You might think, I should have reminded them to slow down, or I'm a bad sibling if I don't pay this for them. You're carrying the weight of their choices as if they were your own. Someone with healthy interdependence knows they are responsible to others, to be compassionate, to be honest, but not responsible for others, for their choices, for their consequences. So, in our example, you might think, I love them, but I didn't cause this situation, and they need to face their own consequences. You might say, I'm sorry you're dealing with that stress, but I'm not going to pay the ticket for you. If you'd like help looking at your budget or sitting with you while you call the court to try to work out a payment plan, I can do that with you. One thing to notice is don't say, I can't pay the ticket or I'm not in a position to pay it. Those may feel softer, but it's like trying to manage their response, their reaction. I'm not going to is actually more respectful, and it's honest and sets a firm boundary. Let's sum up these 4 emotional and psychological indicators this way. Codependency is like a mirror. You look at the other person's problem and only see how it reflects on you, your guilt, your anxiety, your failure. Healthy interdependence is like a window. You look through the window at their problem. You can see it, you can describe it, you can even offer a hand through the window, but you're still standing in your own room. Let's talk about 4 common codependent behaviors that develop from our emotions. The first is overcaring and enabling. This is more than just being nice. It's constantly sacrificing your own needs to solve someone else's problems, like paying bills or loaning money, especially when you can't afford it. Doing things for others that they're capable of doing for themselves. Ultimately, it's trying to please others at your own expense. The second typical behavior is having poor boundaries. This can look like difficulty saying no, which we just discussed. It also looks like being overinvolved. That could be inserting yourself into other people's lives or allowing them to become overly involved in yours. Often, it can look like taking on more than you're able to handle to avoid disappointing others. The third typical behavior is reactionary. We talked about how we can catch someone else's mood. Reactionary behavior is what happens when that catch creates instability in your life. The key here isn't just that you feel what they feel, but that you lose the power to plan your own day, to control your internal environment. You are reacting to their weather rather than living in your own climate. You've handed the remote control for your emotions over to someone else. And the fourth typical behavior is relationship cycling. This is the on again, off again loop. It's when you know a relationship is dysfunctional or even painful, but you return to it often because you confuse intensity or being needed with love. For a person with codependency, being alone can feel like being nothing. So they return to the cycle to feel something. All right, on to you, Karen.
Thanks, Michelle. Remember the 10 signs you may be codependent list we started with? You might have had a loved one in mind. And as we've discussed, many elements of codependency, perhaps you thought of various clients and their lived experiences. We're going to take a few minutes now to give you the opportunity to consider how codependency might be showing up in your life. We've just looked at 4 core behaviors: overcaring, poor boundaries, reactionary behavior, and relationship cycling. Like the pieces of the puzzles on this slide, these behaviors often fit together to create a picture of our daily lives. Maybe one specific piece stood out more than the others. Let's look at 3 more ways codependency might show up in your life. Do you have a hard time asking for help? This can be particularly challenging for men. Men are often socialized that their values come from being the provider, the fixer. They may think asking for help sends a signal that they're not strong enough to do it alone. He may also take on everyone else's stress but not share his own, so he stays the tough, reliable one. but he can end up incredibly lonely and burnt out. Learning that asking for help can actually be an act of healthy interdependence is a huge part of the codependency recovery process for men. Do you worry about others' opinions about you? Maybe you worry if people will like you, be your friend, not get mad at you, etc. You've heard me say it before, I was a raging codependent. I could have been the poster child for codependency back in the day. And I was always concerned about those things. Part of the reason was because I didn't like myself. Today that's changed. I do like who I am. So what you or anyone else thinks about me isn't as important. That's not being arrogant, that's just being honest. Do you stay quiet to avoid conflicts? Maybe you go to great lengths to try to keep the peace, even if it's a false peace. We'd love to provide you with multiple tools and resources, so we want to share this additional codependency quiz with you. Maybe a paper quiz like the 10 signs handout will resonate with you or some of your clients, and others would prefer something online. This interactive online quiz provides immediate feedback and scores on whether your responses indicate that you may have codependent tendencies. Several of the questions are ones we have not covered today, like, do you often apologize for things that aren't your fault? Do you feel anxious or incomplete when you aren't in a relationship? Do you struggle with jealousy or possessiveness in your relationships?
Thanks, Karen.
Yep.
When we ask where codependency starts, we have to look back at the nest, our earliest environments. It often stems from childhoods where emotional needs were consistently unmet or unpredictable, where children learn a survival strategy. They stop looking at their own needs and they start obsessing over the needs of a parent or maybe a sibling just to keep the peace. You aren't born codependent. You're trained into it by your surroundings. These early experiences don't stay in childhood. They create a blueprint for our adult relationships. Maybe you learned that being good meant being useful, and you find yourself stuck in a loop of seeking validation through caretaking. Maybe boundaries feel dangerous because saying no as a child might have led to your mom or dad's angry outbursts, or giving you the cold shoulder, or neglecting you. So you learn to say yes and swallow your no's. Maybe eventually you don't even think no. Maybe abandonment feels inevitable. So you overfunction and people please to make yourself unfireable in your relationships. Think of codependency like the root system of a tree. What we see above ground are the behaviors, but underneath are the causes, like family of origin, growing up with a parent who is chronically ill or struggling with addiction. That often forces you to grow up fast. Survival skills. Your people-pleasing behaviors may have started as a high-level survival skill to maintain security in an unpredictable house. And unresolved trauma. That can leave us with a deep fear of being left behind, being abandoned or rejected, which can drive us to placate or control the moods of everyone around us so that we can feel safe. So what's the impact of all of this on our relationships and well-being? Let's look at 4 common outcomes. The first impact we often see is resentment and anger. Codependency creates a one-way street dynamic. When you are constantly pouring your energy, time, money into someone else without ever being on the receiving end, you don't just get tired, you get bitter. It's the exhaustion of feeling like an unpaid employee in your own relationship. As your codependency grows, we often see a loss of identity. To keep the other person happy, you start trading away pieces of yourself. Maybe you stop going to the gym because you're afraid of the cold shoulder or the guilt trip you'll get for taking an hour for yourself. You maybe stop seeing your friends because it's easier to stay home than it is to deal with the anxiety of what might happen while you're gone or when you get back. Maybe you let your goals gather dust because the other person's in a crisis. It feels selfish to focus on your promotion or your hobby when they're struggling. Eventually, you look in the mirror and don't recognize the person looking back because you've become a supporting character in someone else's movie. You've abandoned your own interests to align your life entirely with theirs. And codependency often leads to relationship stagnation. A healthy relationship's like a living thing. It needs to grow. But codependency is about maintenance and control. You become so focused on keeping the peace, maintaining the status quo, that there's no room for mutual development. The relationship stops being about joy and becomes a project that you're constantly managing. And finally, all of this takes a massive toll on mental health. When your happiness is tied to someone else's mood, you are living in a constant state of high alert. This hyperfocus can lead to chronic stress, anxiety, and depression. Your nervous system is overwhelmed because you've made someone else's internal world your responsibility and the source of your self-worth. Think of your emotional energy like a bank account. Resentment happens because you're making constant withdrawals, but no deposits. Loss of identity is like closing your personal accounts to fund someone else's. Stagnation is like paying high maintenance fees just to keep an account open that earns zero interest. And mental health impact is the overdraft notice. It's your mind and your body telling you that you simply cannot give what you don't have anymore.
So, how can we recover and rebuild? Recovery starts with a mental shift. We often think of boundaries as walls to keep people out, but in recovery, we learn they are actually bridges that allow us to stay connected without getting lost. It's about clearly defining where you end and the other person begins. Without that line, you aren't in a relationship. You're just in a merge that isn't sustainable for anyone. Establishing boundaries is healthy because it helps you reclaim your sense of self and autonomy. Reclaiming your autonomy and prioritizing your own well-being is essential for sustainable relationship because you can only truly be present for someone else when you are also taking care of yourself. You cannot pour from an empty cup. In codependency, we often listen while feeling panicked, resentful, or drained, which means we aren't actually present or listening at all. This is where it all comes together in a way that allows you to support people and protect your own energy and healthy priorities. Let's say you have a friend who calls you every day after work to vent for an hour. It drains you, but you've always listened because you didn't want to be mean. Now you know that you need that hour for your own peace. So you time box your support. You say, I can talk for 10 minutes, then I need to go. You might be tempted to give a reason, but that can open the door to pushback. So don't jade. Don't justify, don't argue, don't defend, and don't explain. Just be calmly firm. Because you've set that limit, you can actually be fully focused on them for those 10 minutes. You know when it will end and when your personal time will resume. And you're showing yourself that you can be a supportive friend and still have a life that belongs to you. You are no longer an extension of their crisis or drama. You're a whole person with your own schedule and your own peace. When you do this, you might feel a guilt spike the first few times. That's normal. It's just your old codependency habit trying to retake control. Breathe through it and stick to your timer. That's where the rebuilding and recovery happens. Let's get into the actual work of rebuilding. We were very specific with the title of this slide, setting and enforcing boundaries. Setting a boundary is like putting a lock on your door. Enforcing it is actually turning the key and locking it. If you set a boundary but don't hold others accountable, then they violate it. You're just making a suggestion, not a change. First, identify your non-negotiables. This is your property line. You need to determine what behaviors simply cannot enter your space anymore, whether that's being spoken to disrespectfully or having your personal time interrupted. Second, practice saying no. This is often the hardest part of recovery. Notice the examples on the screen. A healthy no is clear and concise. You've heard me say it before. No is a complete sentence. It doesn't come with an apology or a 10-minute explanation. Remember the Jade model we discussed a minute ago. Don't justify, Don't argue, don't defend, and don't explain. When you apologize for a boundary, you're telling the other person that your needs are less important than their convenience. Finally, differentiate responsibility. This is the property line rule. In codependency, we try to mow everyone else's lawn. In recovery, you realize that your problem to solve is your own feelings and choices. How someone else feels about your boundary is their lawn to mow. You can be kind, but you cannot be responsible for their reaction.
Thanks, Carrie. I love that mowing image. The first pillar of recovery is self-differentiation. Look at the pawns on the screen. In codependency, if that group of red pawns tips over, the black pawn feels like it has to tip over too. Differentiation is the process of realizing you can stay standing even when the room gets chaotic. It's the art of being connected to someone without becoming lost in them or consumed by them. So, what does this actually look like in your daily life? First, it acts as an emotional shock absorber. Instead of your mood being the mirror of the other person's stress, you remain level. You can acknowledge they're having a hard day without it becoming your hard day. Second, it actually makes you a better support system. Because you aren't drowning in their emotions, you can offer genuine love and support while keeping your own values and identity intact. Think of it like an emotional cold. If your partner has the flu, you can bring them soup and medicine without having to get sick yourself. That's differentiation. You're close enough to care, but you've built up the internal immunity to stay healthy yourself. And the second pillar of recovery is self-definition. While differentiation is about staying standing, self-definition is about knowing who you are standing there. In codependency, we often adopt the values, beliefs, and goals of whoever we're with just to feel secure. Self-definition is the process of building your own identity from the inside out. It's being able to define your own values, beliefs, and goals rather than adopting those of other people. Think of your life like a color palette. For a long time, you might have only used the colors that your partner or your family liked. Self-definition is realizing you actually prefer a completely different set of colors. It starts with small things like what you want for dinner or how you like to spend a Saturday, and it grows until you have a clear picture of your own values and goals. So, how do we actually define ourselves? We can take 3 practical steps. The first one is emotional self-awareness. This involves identifying and labeling your feelings, independent of anyone else's mood or ideas. 2 practices that can help are journaling and mindfulness. Now, we typically think of journaling as writing pen to paper, but it could be electronic, it could be voice recording, it could be talk to text. Mindfulness means being fully aware of right now, this moment, without judging it. It's about noticing your thoughts, feelings, and your surroundings as they happen. Practices that help people become self-aware can include meditation, prayer, quiet time in nature, or whatever roots them in the present moment. And the journaling, that can help you capture what you notice and reflect back on it later. Rediscovering yourself is a key part of being able to define your own values, beliefs, and goals. So re-engaging with old hobbies you used to enjoy, finding new interests, nurturing friendships, all help you find yourself again. And remember that you have a life separate from your relationships. And the third point is self-care. This isn't a luxury. It's a vital part of learning what you value and believe and setting and achieving your own goals. So committing to a regular routine that prioritizes your physical and mental health, like sleep, exercise, good nutrition, quiet time. Self-care isn't selfish, it's necessary.
Thank you, Michelle. So let's talk about a few resources that can support you while healing from codependency. Here is the reality. Your friends, family, or partners may not like the new you at first. They've grown accustomed to and perhaps even dependent on your codependency to meet their own wants and needs and make their lives easier. When you start setting boundaries, they may push back or try to pull you back into your old roles. This is why having an external support system is vital, so you or your clients stay strong in recovery even when others get upset by their progress. So let's take a look at 3 great places to start building that foundation. Therapy. Finding a counselor who understands codependency can help you untangle why you have these patterns without any judgment. Support groups. There's groups like Codependent Anonymous, Alanine. They're both incredibly powerful because you realize you aren't the only one dealing with this. There's a lot of relief in hearing someone else tell their story or tell your story and their story. Recommended reading. If you want to dive deeper on your own, I highly recommend these 4 books. The first book is the one that Niles and I co-facilitate. And through my experience facilitating numerous codependency recovery groups over the years, I've seen so many people who thought they could never change, as well as people who hadn't even realized they were codependent. I've watched them make their first tentative starts, setting that first terrifying boundary, and actually sticking to it. I've seen stagnant relationships begin to breathe again because one person decided to finally prioritize their own well-being. They rebuilt their foundation one brick at a time, and I know you and your clients can do it too. It starts with these resources, but it ends with a life that finally belongs to you. So we have just a few minutes. Let's jump into Q&A. I know we get some questions via private messaging and some in the chat. Margaret, what's our first question?
Thanks, Karen. Okay, so I'm going to give you this first question. How do you hold boundaries when the other person has a legitimate crisis, such as returning to substance abuse, a mental health episode, or homelessness?
That's a great question, but I can only speak for me and my personal experience with all of the above. I don't think using substances after being clean or having a mental health episode or being homeless is an excuse to not have or enforce boundaries. I think it's the very reason to enforce them. Now, let me give you a couple of examples of boundaries I would enforce in these situations, and I have. Things like I would say something like, I won't give you money. Let's just establish that from the start. I won't let you stay with me. How I would offer support is by assisting them in finding a detox location for them to go to, or a mental health facility, or a homeless shelter. Perhaps they don't have a computer or internet. I could source those things for them and I would provide them with the information perhaps, but they would have to take the next steps of calling themselves or showing up there themselves. You know, Margaret, I don't really know if that's the right answer or not, but what I do know is that when people enabled me, I didn't get clean. It wasn't until I had to figure it out on my own that rehab finally worked for me.
That makes sense. Thanks, Karen. That was a great answer. Okay, I'm going to give Michelle this one. Can you be codependent with someone who's generally healthy, or does it require dysfunction on both sides?
Ooh, thanks, Margaret. That's a great question. I think that really gets to the core of how these dynamics work. We talked about codependency kind of thriving on that plug and socket type situation where a giver is seeking their worth through fixing and they find a taker who avoids responsibility. I think if you bring those same habits into a relationship with someone who's generally emotionally healthy and interdependent, I think you'd usually get some pushback, maybe hit a wall of pushback. Instead of leaning on you to solve their problems, a healthy partner would probably say something like, I love you, but I've got this. Let me handle it myself. Because they value their own autonomy. And for the codependent person, that could feel like rejection, but I think it's actually a huge opportunity for self-differentiation. So while it is more common for both sides to be unhealthy, a healthy partner could help you see where you end and they begin.
That was a great answer, Michelle.
Agreed.
We've got a lot of great questions, you guys, so buckle in. I'm going to give Karen this one. What do you say when someone uses forgiveness or turn the other cheek to avoid boundaries?
Mm, that's a great question. I think we need to acknowledge the difference between forgiveness and granting access to oneself. The first is for you. Letting go of bitterness and anger is a healthy part of your own mental health. Granting access is different. When someone gives you this pushback, you could say, turning the other cheek means I won't seek revenge. I have forgiven you, but I won't allow this behavior to continue. I am keeping this boundary in place for my peace. My boundary is not a punishment for you, it is a limit for me.
That's awesome. Okay. Yeah. Woo. Agreed. All right, Michelle, giving it back to you. What do I do if a client's partner or parent is actually the one trying to fix them and won't let the client have the space to feel their own grief?
Oh, we hear things like that on the after abortion line, that, the other person is anxious or they're uncomfortable with my pain and they just want to fix it. They want it to make it stop and they want me to not talk about it. I think that's about the other person managing their own discomfort and then trying to manage the client. I think you could coach the client to set a self-definition boundary that provides direction for the other person. Like the client could say, I appreciate that you want me to feel better, but I need to sit with this grief for a while. You don't need to try to fix it for me. Maybe they could say, if you really want to support me, it would help if you just sit with me while I cry. Or if you take care of dinner or watch the kids for a few hours so I can have some quiet time. Or even just, hey, check back with me in a few days or a few weeks or a few months. It sets a clear boundary. It would differentiate responsibility. The client's grief isn't a problem for the partner or the parent to solve for them. And this would offer a bridge. You give the partner a specific healthy way to stay connected without merging into the client's emotional state. And it would allow the client to maintain their autonomy while still keeping the other person connected.
Okay, another great one.
We have time for one more?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
Okay.
probably another one.
okay.
Okay, great.
The difference between someone whose love language is words of affirmation and someone who is codependent.
That is a great question. The five love languages, I don't remember the name of the author. If you know that, who?
I think it's Gary Chapman.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
that sounds
That's
right.
great.
Yeah.
And there's five of them. I can only remember three. So if you know the other two, please let us know. There's words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts. Do you know the other two, Margaret?
Physical touch, words of
Okay.
affirmation, gift giving, quality time.
Okay, that's it. Yeah, I think that's so. The idea of love languages is that we each have a way that we best receive love. It's like a preference. What's most meaningful for you or me? So if words of affirmation is your love language, you feel most loved and connected when someone praises you, shows appreciation for you, could be spoken or in writing. If you don't receive affirmation, you may feel disappointed, but it doesn't affect your self-worth, like with codependency. It's like, I love hearing appreciation versus I can't feel okay without it. Thank you again for being here.
Bye.